Christianity and Islam.
I just want to make one quick addendum. There's also, who I thought you were going to talk about, is Galen Strawson. I mean, another Oxford philosopher who says that consciousness is actually so impossible philosophically to figure out that it must be that it exists even in inanimate matter, even though it doesn't seem that way. So I don't think that it's, but let's leave aside how difficult consciousness is to figure out without some sort of either strange hypothesis or spirit. Yes, it's true that much of Judaism talks about resurrection, much of it talks about afterlife, but there are there's a plurality of voices. And I mean, the Talmud says, for example, you assume that the sages are in paradise, but it is not so. In fact, paradise is in the sages. That's not the sort of voice that generally you hear when the literalist view of an afterlife is attacked. And for more on that, I turn to my colleague, Rabbi Brad Artson.
I would actually love for us all to go out to coffee and leave them aside so that we could say things like, wow, that's really interesting, I haven't thought about that. And what do you do with this? Rather than the scoring of points. And so there's a lot of cleverness and there are a lot of quips. But at the end of it, what it sounds like we're saying is that religion is a monolith, and the worst of religion is compared to the best of science, which is fluid and evolving. And I'm halfway there with you. I think one of the greatnesses of science is its capacity to be self-reflective and its capacity to change convictions. But the wreckage of scientific error is fairly impressive, and the diversity of religious thought is also, I think, undergirded, unfortunately, I think in part because we all had bad religious education as kids and we're still in recovery. So,
but Bradley, I want to accept your challenge, but what do you, I mean, is Maimonides the worst of religion? Maimonides came right out and said you have to believe in the resurrection as a literal
yes, and Maimonides
truth.
also said that what I've written in my book is disguised so that people will, if they need literalism, latch onto it and miss what I'm trying to say. And he also said that we call the world to come because we don't experience it during this lifetime, but eternity exists at the present. And if you attain a right consciousness, you can be in eternity now. So the challenge is, we all come to it with our own different concrete needs, but religion is, I think, far more nuanced. And I guess the plea I would like to offer to you, because the parts of your books, both of you gentlemen, that I agreed with was everything you trashed religion for, it deserves to be trashed for. I have an autistic son, and if I believed in that bully in the sky, I would have to tell Dr. Wexler that I was leaving my employment. But I don't, and I don't think that my tradition, or the Buddhist tradition, or the richness of Hindu tradition, understood in a nuanced and ethical way, is any more problematic than science's capacity to learn from its mistakes and to move on. And the way the Bible is used in my community with my students is, I would hold up as ethical as anywhere else, and a part of that is the recognition that although we do not know, we hold to hopes that orient us and allow us to value each other as of abiding significance.
Which can be done by anyone who repudiates the supernatural. Look, I don't mind attacking religion at its best if you'd rather I do that. I mean, behind the idea of judgment, remember, which is part of the deal of the afterlife and the reward of heaven or hell, is some rough concept of justice, that there's an equalization of the odds against which we struggled when we were alive, that the tears are dried, and that the wrongdoing is punished. Very, very old wellspring of human aspiration. Why do the wicked prosper? I would really like to know. And why, as Hamlet says, so much contumely is heaped on the patient and the meek. Now, the reason why Sam's Oxonian friend disturbs us when he elaborates his theory is we don't like to think they were just digitized by someone else's brain, that we're rats in some maze, someone else's maze. Nor, though, rather interestingly, do we like to think that everything that happens to us is random. We repudiate both ideas. They're both equally distressing. But the reason why I started with my totalitarian point is this. Take the case that I still can't get out of my mind. You remember reading about it, the woman in Austria who was kept in a cellar by her father for 30 years and raped every day and bore him children who he raped also. Picture how she must have prayed, how she must have wearied heaven with her prayers, and how accidental was her release that we even know about. You're told those tears will be dry, that'll be compensated. In other words, that has to mean her suffering was part of the plan. We let that happen. Yes, we did know. We do take responsibility. That was part of the design, but it'll be better later. I think that makes her suffering meaningless, and in fact rather obscene. We'll do that to her, but we'll make it up later on. Take another great Austrian, now deceased, born in Braunau on the Inn, and dead in May, I think, 1945. Yes, that was all part of the plan too, but believe me, we'll see to it that he's punished for it. Now, if you don't mind my saying so, Rabbi, that kind of thinking seems to me to materialize both the worst in the concept, the horrible idea of the human being as an experimental object in a design that's opaque to us, where we're played with, and to maximize the horror of randomness. To pick one Austrian, make him very nearly the ruler of the whole of Europe, another Austrian, and keep her as a prisoner of her rapist father for 3 decades. And that's all part of the plan too. So it's maximizing chaos, and it's maximizing tyranny and deliberate cruelty. And that's why I think reason has to repudiate this whole means of thinking. Reason and justice too, I should have added.
As I'm sure it would if religion thought that way, but it doesn't, in fact.
Wait a minute.
No, wait.
Dave, I'll give you your time here, please.
Okay.
That's the move that's really not open to you. If you want to change the subject to a truly purified wisdom tradition that is non-dogmatic, that's just open to mystery, you have to...
No, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, but if you want to follow the path...
You have to hear the move before you repudiate.
No, but I think you're taking the move that Bradley...
You think so, but I might not be.
Well, let me just tell you what I heard you do.
Okay, go ahead.
You just said religion is not the way Christopher suggested it was, and in the vast majority of cases, it is. And so you have to at least admit that we are not caricaturing religion. 50% of Americans think they're going to see their pets in heaven. I mean, we're dealing.
It wouldn't be heaven if you don't.
Right. We're having this conversation in the context of how religion is practiced.
Soon?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
There are strains of religion that are deterministic and say that everything that happens in the world is a plan. There are. Calvinism, for example, does that. In Judaism, that's actually very rare. There are a couple of notable thinkers who say that, but almost no notable Jewish thinker believes that what happens here is preordained by God. And in fact, free will, and the free will to do horrendous things, is built into the system and is the prerequisite of the chance of human beings to both sin and also to do wonderful things. So when you say that God made this man do this, that's all part of the plan, and she's going to be rewarded in the afterlife for the horror that God inflicted on her here, I can, with all good conscience, say, look, I'm not going to speak for the pet envisioning Christians that you speak for, but I will speak certainly for my own tradition and say that that's not actually what Judaism believes. It's not what almost any major Jewish thinker says, and I wouldn't believe it if it did say that. So
that's a great cafeteria to be shopping at. Take your pick.
What do you mean, take your pick? I just said that almost no major Jewish thinker says that, and if they did, I wouldn't agree with them.
Both of you, confronted with Sam's perfectly clear attribution of the words of the Rambam, you said, well, it's as likely that paradise is in the sages as the sages are in paradise.
I didn't say it, the Talmud did.
Yes, all right, the Talmud says. And your colleague says, Maimonides writes in order to be misunderstood, and it's deliberately, which is, by the way, I quite agree with the Straussian reading of him that says that that is so. But this is a guide to the perplexed. what you're saying is he wants to intensify perplexity.
Welcome to
Well,
Judaism.
I also, yes. He also, look, when you say, for
So
example,
you have this smorgasbord
let me
of
give you
options
a
which you're
little
helping yourself
sample of
to.
how Rambam thinks. When it says, for example, in Isaiah that the lion will lay down with the lamb, right? And you know Woody Allen's line that
Yes.
the lion will lay down with the lamb, but one of them won't get much sleep. So,
No, the lamb, actually.
so Rambam says this is not to be understood literally. It means big nations and small nations will dwell together in amity, and you should not think that the order of nature will be overturned. Now, I didn't invent that. It's right there. I can show it. It's the end of Malachim. It's
Yes.
the end of the code of law. And he has a sophisticated understanding of religion. If you say to me, are there people with an unsophisticated understanding of religion? I have no doubt that there are. I even know a few. But you're not sitting with them on a stage. And I don't think it's actually, I don't understand my task to be to defend understandings of religion that I don't adhere to. So I'm happy to argue with you what I understand about religion, but obviously, if I thought mainstream Christianity was the way to understand religion, I'd be a mainstream Christian.
Right.
And I'm not.
Well, I want to make 2 points in response. I just want to kind of show you all how the sausage of faith gets made. Or at least argued for. I see 2 problems with what you just did, and perhaps you're aware of them. One is that Maimonides actually said that this could not be understood allegorically or in any other way, but literally he came back 25 years later after he had been misunderstood in the Guide to the Perplexed and wrote, I think in his commentary to the Mishnah, that the resurrection is a literal truth, has to be believed in. There may be some caveats there in his theology, but he was talking about bodies being reanimated. The other issue is you made this sort of artful move to the free will loophole. You said people have free will. If a man wants to lock his daughter in a dungeon and have sex with her, God has allowed that because he's given us this rather diabolical freedom. That doesn't cover all of the other suffering for which only God can be responsible if he exists. The 9 million children I just talked about dying every year through cancers and violence and accidents and lack of access to clean water. And this is God's fault if God exists. I mean, either he can do nothing about this, or he doesn't care to. So either he's impotent or evil. I mean, this is the problem that the free will doesn't get you out of.
David and Brad, I wanted to pick up on that point in the context of this afterlife issue, which is, if you believe in a just God, how could you not believe in a world to come where the good receive benefits and the evil are punished?
Look, the challenge here is everyone has great clarity in the God they don't believe in. And I don't believe in that God either. Right? So,
Well, then what's God? But so how do you tell us how you understand gratuitous misfortune visited upon the innocent?
Like being in a debate like this.
Oh. My condolences.
Not forgiven. So, look. This is a talk I give to first-year rabbinical students and congregations all over the country. It is a medieval mistake based on Aristotelian thought that God has to be a simple, unmoved mover, and thereby eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. Right? Those are terms that don't exist in biblical or in rabbinic Hebrew. So I apologize for the way the philosophers kidnapped the traditions, but it's not in the Torah. There is no Hebrew word for omnipotent, meaning all-powerful, and the concept is a nonsense concept.
So you're saying God doesn't have the power to change these things?
Yes, of course that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that what God has is a different kind of power than the power of the dictator that Christopher Hitchens and I both despise. And that what I look to God to be is a persuasive power, more comparable to a teacher or a lover or a parent, who teaches and inspires you to be the best by seeing your potential and by giving you the vision and the power to rise to it. But I don't believe in a God who breaks the rules or who can intervene or who can do magic. And the challenge here, wait, I want to just, may I just say one more thing before you leap on me?
Sure, sure.
It is the 125th anniversary of the birthday of Alfred North Whitehead, my Rebbe. And so in his honor, I tell you the following Hasidic story. The story is told of the Kutzker Rebbe, one of the great masters of the Hasidic tradition, who, walking past someone's home, sees that they're so impoverished they don't have the capacity to have a Shabbat meal. And so he prays for her to have a Shabbat meal magically bestowed upon her. I mean this only metaphorically. And no actual chassid involved in the story itself. So he prays that she should have this miraculous Shabbat dinner given to her, and she does, and he hears a vision which says, because you've intervened in the affairs of this world, you've lost your place in the world to come. And he starts to dance. And he says, when his students question him, he says, for the first time, I'm able to serve God without expectation of reward. That's in mainstream rabbinic tradition. So often I had the sense that what's being criticized is a kind of ignorant abuse of religious nuance, and we certainly know, anyone who's been in an airport has read self-help books that claim to use scientific findings to justify all kinds of stupidities, which I don't think you can hold science responsible for, even though probably numerically there are far more people who have nonsense ideas based on false science as they do in religion. The challenge here is you say it's man-made, and I agree. It is man-made, as is medicine, as is law, but the solution to bad medicine and bad law is not to get rid of it. The solution is to have open discussions and continue to refine it and surpass it. Christopher.
There's a story I was told, not unlike that, but a Roman Catholic priest, actually it couldn't really be any Christian. There's a comparable. This is not my fault.
Just hold the mic. Hold the mic. Yeah.
Okay. There's a comparable story I was told about the death of I think it was a Roman Catholic priest, but it could be any Christian official, really, who gets to St. Peter's Gate and is told, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Here's your place we've been preparing for you in paradise. And he says to St. Peter, but I see that there's terrible suffering and deprivation and misery among the souls in hell. Surely my place is with them, ministering to them. And he's told, you really don't get it, do you? One of the reasons why I like doing this, some people say sometimes, don't I ever get tired of debating with the religious? No, absolutely I don't, because you never know what they're going to say next. Sam and I don't mind being called predictable. It's very easy. We know what we think. We say straight out where we think we know and where we think it's not possible to know, why we don't think there's a supernatural, and so on. But this evening already we've had your suggestion that God is only really a guru, a friend when you're in need. I mean, he wouldn't do anything like bugger around with Job to prove a point. And which, if I now tell you, well, that must mean that that book is not the Word of God, you'd say, well, whoever believed that ever was the Word of God? Let me just tell you something. For hundreds and thousands of years, this kind of discussion would have been in most places impossible to have, or Sam and I would have been having it at the risk of our lives. Religion now comes to us in this smiley face, ingratiating way, because it's had to give so much ground, and because we know so much more. But you've no right to forget the way it behaved when it was strong, and when it really did believe that it had God on its side.